Thanks.
Pablo.
First of all, thanks a lot, Daniel, for this invitation to this event, and also to the organizers of the second international workshop on time studies in childhood and youth. It's really a pleasure to be here. So indeed, my presentation is going to be about child and adolescent time use in cross-national perspective. I'm going to essentially cover two research questions in this presentation. Question number one is going to be whether children's and adolescents' daily activities differ across national contexts. And question number two, and related, whether boys and girls differ in their daily activities and how national contexts can influence gender differences in children's time use. So this is a collaborative work. Here I'm showing you my three collaborators in this project. Timo Antila from the University of Jyväskylä, Joan Garcia Roman from the Universitat Autònoma de Barcelona, and Tommy Oinas also from the University of Jyväskylä. So there are essentially two research questions in this presentation. Research question one, does children's and adolescents' time use differ across countries with distinct policy and cultural characteristics? Question number two, do gender gaps in children's and adolescents' time use differ across national contexts? So why is it important to study children's time use from a social sciences perspective? Research from the last decades has shown very clearly that the way children engage in daily activities is related to their present and future well-being. So for example, from research, we know that when children engage in active interactions with their parents, they tend to do better in a number of indicators. Also, educational activities such as reading, homework, or other extracurricular educational activities are also associated with present and future outcomes. The same applies to sleeping. So understanding children's engagement in developmental activities is important. On the contrary, there are other activities that are associated with both opportunities but also risks. So for example, in a recent paper together with Melissa Bochner from Trinity College Dublin, we found that when children are spending too much time in screen-based activities, their mental health can decline. So in short, and sorry here I'm not that used to collaborate ultra, but in short, understanding how children engage in daily activities is important for their well-being. So what factors can influence children's time use? So the literature has played quite a lot of importance and has studied individual and household level characteristics. So we know that, for example, boys and girls differ in their daily activities. Other studies have focused on parental SES. We know from research that children from different socioeconomic characteristics engage differently in daily activities. And also parental work schedules matter. So for example, in a recent paper, I found that children in Spain, for example, tend to engage in less developmental activities when their parents work evening hours. But most of this research has focused on the individual and household level. What about the national context? We certainly know very little from previous research on whether the country in which children are living can predict or can tell us something about children's daily activities. Children's daily activities are not only important from a household level perspective, but adopting a bioecological model is also important to know what happens in the society that might influence children's activities. So this is a table that summarizes the three countries of the studies I'm going to present here: Finland, Spain, and the United Kingdom. Finland is well known for having one of the most gender egalitarian regimes, for example, in how men and women allocate time to paid work and unpaid work, and other policies. I'm really sorry, I don't know why things are moving. I'm not really used to collaborate ultra, but in any case, well, sorry for that. In any case, it is important to concentrate on these three countries. So for example, Spain is more associated with what we call a family-related type of regime, where, for example, the family is a very important actor in the distribution of solidarity. And finally, the United Kingdom is more associated with what we call liberal welfare state, where, for example, many women work part-time, and also there are high levels of individualism in everyday life. So here I'm showing you just an example of how these countries look like when we, for example, address gender differences or gender inequalities in adults' time use. So we see in short that Finland, for adults at least, is the most egalitarian country, followed by the United Kingdom, and Spain, in activities such as leisure, paid work, or domestic work, is a country where men and women differ more in their daily activities. Now, we don't know whether this is the same, and it applies also for the younger generations. And this, of course, motivates our study. So let me briefly present the data and the methods. We are using very high quality time diary data from three countries, Finland, Spain, and the United Kingdom. We observe about 3,500 diary observations represented across these three countries. We implement different types of multivariate linear regression models, such as OLS and seemingly unrelated regressions. And also we show results for an average week of the day and predicted results after controlling for a number of demographic and socioeconomic variables. So this is the first study I'm presenting. This is a paper recently published at the Journal of Marriage and the Family. I can send you the details. This is essentially the title and the abstract. The objective of this study was very straightforward, but in our opinion, important. We wanted to know whether children in Spain, Finland, and the United Kingdom differ in their daily activities. And the short answer was that they differ, and they differ a lot when you compare equally comparable data of children's daily activities. So let me show you the first results of this study one. Here, what you are seeing is the predicted number of minutes that children and adolescents aged 10 to 17 allocate to 5 activities that represent the 24 hours of a random day. First of all, we see that children in Finland spend way less time than in the other countries. So look here, for example, in your left-hand side. You see that in Spain, a family-related country, is where children spend more time with their parents, either the mother or the father on a random day, 300 minutes. The UK is closer to 200, and Finland is closer to 100 daily minutes. Okay, these are absolutely comparable measures. What about time with others? Interestingly, even if Spain is typically, seen as a country where people socialize a lot, we see that the other way around happens. So the time that Finnish children spend more with parents, they tend to spend it with others, with individuals outside the family. Also, we found that Finland differs quite a lot from Spain and the UK here on your right-hand side in the way that children spend more time alone. And differences are quite remarkable in terms of magnitude size and significant differences when you look at interactions. About the school time, even if you cannot see it very clearly, we found that Spanish children spend more time in schooling activities than UK and Finnish children. This is consistent with OECD data. Contrary to what has been claimed in terms of sleeping, we don't find any difference across countries in sleeping time. But we also looked at the specific activities in which children were engaging. So we see, for example, that in Spain, children spend less time in screen-based activities than in the UK and Finland, and also more time in educational activities outside outside the school. So this is consistent also with some research in the OECD countries that claims, for example, that in Finland, together with the UK, children tend to do less homework and so on and so forth. Differences are quite clear there. And then other, more descriptive but interesting differences, for example, in terms of eating. As we know, Spanish families are well known for spending more time eating. And here we see the difference between Spain and the UK and Finland. But also it's interesting to find that in Finnish children spend more time socializing compared to Spanish children. So this is also an interesting finding, I would say. So I'm going to spend the last minutes presenting the study too. This is a study that here I'm showing you the preprints. Comments are welcome. The study is relatively advanced, but I will really benefit from your comments. So in this study, we are looking at gender. Again, sorry, I don't know what I'm doing, but I'm not moving my mouse. Gender differences in children's time use across the 3 countries I presented. Okay. And this is really an interesting study in the sense that we are showing that contrary to the gender differences that I show you before, in fact, gender differences in time use in Finland, Spain, and the UK actually do not correspond to the gender differences that we look when we examine the adult population. So here I'm showing you the table of our paper. If you want to look more into detail, you can go to the paper. But here I'm showing you the predicted values. I'm going to stop the mouse. Hopefully the screen doesn't do strange things. Essentially, we have here 6 activities: screen-based activities, non-screen educational activities, socializing, exercising, domestic work, and personal care. So the first thing that we find is that gender differences apply to all countries. So in all countries, boys and girls use their time differently. For example, boys do more screen-based time, girls do more domestic work and personal care, boys do also more exercising, and girls do more educational activities. But when we look more closely, we see that even if these gaps apply to all countries, gender gaps are largest in the United Kingdom. Okay, so we developed different tests such as interaction effects or other models where you see that UK shows the largest gender gaps, so the largest differences between boys and girls in their daily activities. On the contrary, Spain, where when we look at adults, shows the higher levels of gender inequalities in time use. Spain is the country where gender gaps between boys and girls, aged 10, 17, are smaller. Finland is somewhere in between. Differences between Spain and the UK are statistically significant. I would like to discuss with you later on why we expected these results, how surprising they are. I'm going to here summarize the study. I think I'm right on time. So the first results that I presented in this presentation is that there are very clear cross-national differences in how children and adolescents spend time in their daily activities. Even when we look at Western European industrialized countries with relatively similar levels of income, we see that after accounting for socioeconomic and demographic factors, there are clear cross-national differences in children's time use. For example, Spanish children spend 2 hours and a half more time with parents than Finnish children, using absolutely comparable data for an average day of the week. Also, Spanish children are much less likely than Finnish children to spend time alone, but they also spend 1 hour less compared to Finnish children in activities with others outside the family. The UK was a bit closer to Spain in time with parents and a bit closer to Finland in time with others. We think that these descriptive findings are really important because they are telling us that countries in Europe differ dramatically in terms of how children's and adolescents' daily activities operate. But also, we found that boys and girls, yes, consistent with recent literature, differ a lot. Boys do more screen-based time, more exercising. Girls do more study, more personal care, and domestic work. However, we found that the UK showed the highest gender gaps, followed by Finland in many respects, and Spain, which is typically depicted as a more family traditional country with higher levels of gender equality, especially compared to Finland, but also to some degrees to the United Kingdom, was the country where differences between boys and girls in their time use were smaller. So I'm gonna conclude here. Thanks a lot. So here I'm giving you my email address, so I would be really happy to collaborate with you or exchange ideas if you want. This is a summary of one of the two papers, and again, sorry that the slides are moving. Thanks a lot.
Thank you so much, Pablo, for this very interesting introduction to two works of yours. It's not only one, but we've got a special offer where we have two studies in one. Thank you very much. I think it has been very, very interesting. Meanwhile, people decide what questions to ask. I will also like to comment some of the rest that you have brought us. I know a little bit of Finland, not so much. I know a little bit more of Estonia, which is not so far from Finland, and they have some similarities in terms of arrangement. And it's true also Finnish children are known also for this effect of the children of the keys, right? Children who go to school on their own and come back to school from school back home, and they are on their own until the parents join them, right? And this is something that you saw very, very clearly in your data, no? Time they spend alone, time that they also spend with others. You know much better about this use time survey. What you use? You also differentiate sometimes about the primary and secondary activity in the survey. Just to know, because of course, as we have seen also in our studies, school time in Spain is much longer than in Finland, for instance. Some of the social interaction that children have in Spain is also done while in the school, no? In the breaks and in the lunch break. And this is accounted also in your accountability of time with others, with these peers? Thank you.
Yes, that's a very good question. Essentially, we are looking at activities outside school. So it is true that in Spain, children spend more time in school. Surprisingly, they also spend way more time with parents compared to Finland. So that's actually an interesting finding. It is true we are not looking at activities within school. So we are taking essentially schooling activities as constant. Also, it is difficult that all these variations are explained by differences in school time, because I think there was a difference of about 20 to 30 minutes per day, which is quite a lot in cross-national perspectives. But essentially, we don't think that by not accounting, schooling activities, we are producing noise in the results. Educational activities are educational activities outside the school. And this is very interesting for the Spanish case, because this means that it's not only that Spanish children spend more time at school, but also studying outside the school. I hope that I answered the question.
Yes, thank you very much. This is also something that we saw, no? Spanish kids are the ones who spend most time in the school, and then most time also studying outside the school with homeworks, and also having these reinforcement classes or private tutoring next to it. There is a question of David Hill, if you would like to open the micro.
So, hi Pablo, I loved your presentation. I was saying about gender gaps in children's time use, especially regarding care and domestic work. You said the UK and Finland had higher gender gaps, but what about the absolute levels? I mean, are Finnish and British girls and boys spending more time in housework than Spanish girls and boys, or less? That's a good question. Let me remember about the findings. My understanding and what I remember is that housework was highest in the UK, followed by by Finland, and then in Spain, children did a bit less housework. But absolute differences also applied. I mean, of course, the lower the absolute numbers, the lower also the gap when you look at minutes, if you want, right? But it was interesting also that in the UK, I mean, we can come back to the slides, but in the UK, children spend more time in domestic work than in Spain. So this might tell you maybe something about differences at the cultural level of how parents, engage with children, how they protect their time. Maybe it also shows that parents in Spain maybe are more protective, where women do particularly more housework. But I think that the key finding of our studies actually precisely that boys and girls in Spain are more similar in their daily activities. And the answer is, why is this happening, right? In the presentation, I didn't have much time to develop on that. We developed two hypotheses. One was, if you want, the gender egalitarian simple hypothesis. We expected in this hypothesis that countries with higher levels of gender egalitarianism, okay, which is a general indicator, would also translate into more gender egalitarianism or more gender similarities between boys and girls, right? But then there was another alternative hypothesis that we developed, namely that when we think about children and adolescents, gender processes are particularly unique. And we also know, for example, that the schools are very important in structuring time. So for example, now in the COVID-19 pandemic, what we are finding is that at least some studies from Germany, I'm also collaborating with a colleague from Denmark, we are finding that gender gaps are increasing. Why? Because schools, to some degree, standardize activities, right? So this is one part of the story. Another part of the story is that even if families can generate a reproduction of gender roles through, for example, imitation and other mechanisms, children might be more likely to do gender, to engage in the activities they are more passionate about, precisely and paradoxically, when they have more time to do so. So in societies that organize and provide more autonomy of time and space for children to engage in their preferred activities, Finland and the United Kingdom as well to some degree, might be societies where children might have more room to do gender. And this is, of course, something that we cannot fully test. This is, I think, the first study using high-quality time diary data comparing these three countries, or from a cross-national perspective, at least in Western Europe. And we open the question of the degree to which country-level factors, as well as cultural factors or schooling, might play a role there. This is something that we cannot study with our data because we have a small n number of countries, yes. But we would like to examine this, for example, if it is possible with a larger sample size, even if there are very few countries that have data of children aged 10 and 17. So I think I extended myself a little bit, but I wanted to give a bit of background for the question.
Thank you very much.
Thanks a lot, David. Hi, Margarita.
Hi, Pablo. I mean, I don't have any problem. I mean, I think that, anyway, let's go ahead. It was a very nice presentation, Pablo. I really liked it a lot. Sorry, I missed the first part of the presentation. I hope that I am not making double question, but I have two main questions. I mean, you're analyzing children time use and parents time with children, right? I mean,
well, that's a very good question. So let me summarize here. So one part of the analysis, and this is more in the JMF, Journal of Marriage and the Family paper. So we look at the 24 hours. So that's I think, an interesting description, because we look at sleeping, schooling, and then time can be alone, time can be with at least one parent, and time can be with someone from outside the family. So these are absolutely mutually exclusive activities that cover the 24 hours. But then also in separate analysis, we also address the exact activities in which children were engaging, right? So this is what we did in the paper one.
Yeah, but I mean, I am thinking from a methodological point of view. I mean, I am thinking that at what point have you checked if the time that parents report that they spend with children and the time that children say that they are with parents, is it match, or is there any kind of discordance or how they report their time? Yeah.
That's a very good question. So we are looking at children's diaries. So I think I'm very much a defender of asking children how they spend time. At the same time, it's really interesting to look at parents. But in this study, we are looking at what children say. So these are diaries that are filled and like conducted by the children themselves. They are aged 17. And we are using comparable measures for comparable samples. So the average age of the child is 13.5 in all countries, with a quite clear gender, well, the same gender distribution.
Okay, no. I mean, I fully agree that we need to look from the children perspective, because I am presenting tomorrow a project. We are looking at that specifically. And if I have time, if I could make a second question, just very general, like in terms of that, as I said, I follow your approach that we need to take children approach to say how they spend their time. But if you have to say if is there any limitations related how children fill the diaries, because even the diaries are very high quality. I mean, I've been trying to fill some diaries and they are time consuming. 10 minutes a slot is tidying, the structure, how the diary is designed. I don't know, sometimes it's not very friendly. I don't know if you have any thoughts about that.
Yes, that's a very good question. We are making an assumption that the way the diaries have been filled in the 3 countries is the same, and actually this is not only an assumption, but it's truth. It's the truth. It is true that there might be some issues of missingness, even if in our data we are to some degree accounting for that because we are using weights, and to some degree this is capturing whether it might be the case that in some countries missingness is less random than in others, for example. But at the same time, what we could claim is the following: is that even if the data have been collected using the same procedures in the 3 countries, we could argue to some degree that because of cultural understandings about spending time alone or with others, it might be that Finnish children perceive their time with parents in a different way than Spanish children, right? So it could be, for example, that Finnish children might report being alone more frequently, and particularly being with parents less frequently, when they are, for example, in a relatively close space, right? So this is something that we partly accounted by looking at where parents and children were. Results didn't change much, but it's also important to think of how children are reporting their time with others, because this is in the end a subjective measure, right? But it's a subjective measure, if you want, to some degree, of your 24 hours that applies to all countries. So essentially we are doing our best, and we are actually comparing the countries using the same data.
Okay, thank you very much.
Thanks. I think there was a final question, but I don't know.
Yes, thank you. I'm taking time of my own presentation, so it doesn't matter. And I really want to ask you, because I also find that your presentation was really interesting and your work. And sorry if I was missing something from the beginning, because maybe you have said that, and it's an obvious question, but even though I would like to know a bit more about it. You were saying that you were asking, I understood perfectly, the different types of activities and also with who they were spending activities. But I was thinking all the time, especially when you said that in Spain, you know, the activities out of the school, but that are homework are so huge. Have you crossed that with the information with the time with parents? So is it there a possibility that that time spent with parents was doing this homework, or have you seen something in particular towards that? And also in the Finnish children, have you crossed the information between being alone and also dedicating time to homework, and if it is more or less than Spanish children? I'm really interested about that, and I don't know if you were crossing information or not. Sorry if you said that in front, but I'd like to know it. Thank you.
Thanks a lot. I'm gonna try to be super short so that I don't take time from your presentation. Actually, in the second paper I was presented, we have in the appendices, so you can go to the preprint, is in SOC archive. We actually show that it is true that time with parents in general leads to less gender differences than time alone or with others. It depends on the activities, right? But what we see more or less is that, as far as I remember, and you can look at this table in the appendices of the gender paper, yeah. The distribution does not differ that much across countries. So when you look at time with parents, for example, the distribution is more or less similar. There are some variations. When you look at time with others, the same. So again, in paper one, we did not look at with whom certain activities were performed, but certainly this is an important question. And I think, I mean, maybe we can talk about it later, because otherwise.
Yeah, thank you very much, Pablo.